This is the office hours for the system squad, which was previously packaging and installation. So just this squad focuses on, I think, system requirements, install configuration experience, and different distribution formats. As Sean had said for framework, and I think is true for this squad as well. There's not many, new features or breaking changes coming for V3 as compared to the prior release. So if you were around for the V1 to V2 change, there were massive install and packaging changes for Zowe. We redid our entire, file structure on disk. We redid our entire installation at that point in time and configuration, and we redid our, packaging format for extenders. And um, this time around, there's not going to be any changes like that. We're just going to be making incremental improvements on, I think, the platforms we already have. So I'll skip past this slide because I think Lenny ran through this with the app framework. Um, Quickly, I crossed out new features and said improvements because I think from System Squad perspective, we're more looking at improvements, and a lot of the contributions to install configuration distribution formats, we get those from both from System Squad members as well as other squads within the community. So for instance, the Zen installation Lenny just went through, I think is, a big improvement to the experience and is being driven a lot by the app framework squad. Outside of that, I think we're looking at continued improvements to the config experience using the ZWE command line. So things like there's going to be more schema validation. So you get quicker and better error identification earlier on in the process. You're not going to be running halfway through your install and then get a strange error because there was an invalid value somewhere in your YAML file. If there's something wrong, it should just pop out right in the beginning and let you know that this is probably going to fail if you try to go forward with it. We're also improving the performance of the install configuration by shifting from the pure shell script environment that we had before to now the shell plus config manager. And really it's 99% config manager. Shell is just bootstrapping it. And, something we get by moving to that config manager is the richer Zowe.yaml experience. So we're going to be able to do more, I think, with these configuration files in V3, including having templating and sort of code snippets in the YAML, as well as supporting ZOS system symbols references and merging multiple YAML files together to create a whole. This is very useful if you have like multiple systems where you want to deploy a Zowe, but you only need to configure a subset of the information for each system. You can sort of externalize that subset into its own YAML file and then merge them on the command line. Right, so it makes it easier to organize and manage these Zowe YAMLs going forward. Some of this stuff's already, by the way, available in newer versions of V2. That's why this isn't really a new feature coming in V3. We do have it available in the latest, I think, V2 out right now, but this is going to be, out of the box from the start with V3.0 available. So it'll always be available for any Zowe V3 installation. And also along the lines of an improved experience, Zowe diagnose. So if you do get an error back from one of these ZWE commands, you can run this Zowe diagnose and pass it the error message, and it will give you, I think, a little bit better information about what might have gone wrong. Right, so a little more detail about what's going on and what you could do to try and troubleshoot next. And that's on the install and configuration experience. I think from distributions and packaging, we're still looking to support the same formats as before. There's going to be the convenience packs. There's going to be an SMPE install in the PSWI format as well. I believe that, yes, the PSWI format was LTS in V2. That continues in V3. In addition, we're looking at, areas where we can improve around supply chain security, since that's, a focus in the industry right now and for good reason. We did have SBOMs available in V2, but we're going to, I think do a format refresh for V3, try and picking up the newest standards, specifically the newest SPDX formats. And I think we should, also reevaluate how we're going to be delivering SBOMs to users. If anybody on the line has any, opinions about how you'd like to receive SBOMs from the community, that could help influence, our decision making. And also, we want to improve on our digitally signed artifacts. So, today I think all of our artifacts that are produced by the Zowe community and made available on Zowe.org, they are all digitally signed, but the instructions to use those signatures aren't available for all those artifacts. So like I think, for our packs, we instruct users how they can use the digital signature to verify, um, the material they're downloading, but we don't include the same instructions for the rest of the binaries we're providing. So we should be doing that just to be consistent. But additionally, we also want to investigate using SigStore. One of the problems in the industry generally today is that digital signatures are they can be I don't want to say difficult to use, but the barrier is just high enough that most people will bypass it and skip over it because it's just a little too hard to get everything set up on your local machine to verify the digital signature actually matches the archive. SigStore is really interesting because it's a way of making it easier to do this digital signature verification, right? So just lowering the barrier to actually performing this operation. And this is all, again, important for supply chain security, making sure that the artifacts that you get are genuine and making sure that everything inside of them is also well known and understood and um, gives you a clear view of what you're actually putting on your system, right? And then you can use that material to um, determine other analyses like is anything I'm putting on my system vulnerable to any well-known vulnerabilities, right? So all this is the sort of technology that lets you start walking down that path. Under breaking changes, I have no breaking changes planned, but I think there's a couple of things to keep your eye on or be aware of. One of them is that building out the stricter schema validation for Zowe YAML may rarely cause a previously passing command to fail. So if you were using like a Zowe install or Zowe um, configure command, a ZWE, I should say, um, it may have been running before, but it may have been running in error. So there may have been an invalid value somewhere in there that we just weren't catching. In this case, when we ship stricter schema validation, it's not going to let that failing Zowe.yaml pass. So this isn't really a breaking change because we're essentially doing a better job of catching configuration files that probably had errors in them, but it's something to be aware of. Like when we went from Zowe v1 to Zowe v2, there's going to be a new fmid for Zowe v3. I think that's just, again, something to be aware of. And lastly, as we were just talking about before, so with Zowe v3, API-ML is going to require Java 17. It's going to be the minimum supported version of Java. And Java 17 requires ZOS 2.5. So if you want to run Zowe v3 and API-ML, you're going to need ZOS 2.5. And there's no changes to our conformance program. And I think everything else is the same here with the other squads. Same timeline. We're going to have a pre-release as soon as possible. I think like App Framework, it'll probably be sometime early December. And I can update the slide with that information. And yeah, I think that was everything. I know we're close to the end. Any questions on this, or I guess we can go back to Zen and App Framework questions as well.
Yeah, I want to, this is Judy again. I want to know when you said that you're using the config manager and it's handling merging and things like that. It already does that, right? We've been using the parmlib a data set rather than a YAML file for our product. And a long time ago, when we first hatched this plan to do that, and the config manager was just getting its feet wet with actually handling the parmlib stuff, we said, what are we going to call our parmlib member? And so some discussion occurred, and the parmlib member got called ZWE YAML. And I wanted to sort of make sure that you're going to stick to that, because we're the only people who are using it. And we talked about, well, shouldn't it be IZP YAML? But then if you're having like a concatenation of parmlibs, you want them all to be the same name, if it's not just our product and stuff. So just bringing that up as a little factoid and hoping that you are sticking to that if you're going to support parmlib for other people.
Yep. It doesn't seem like it's going to change the fact that all the parm libs have to have the same member name. So ZWE YAML sounds like a great name for that purpose. And what Mark was really talking about when he said that there's going to be more of this is you may recall that the Zowe ZWE commands are split up into different phases. There's an install phase and a init phase, and then the just run my program stuff. And the init phase and the install phase never got the config manager treatment. So if you had a really nifty template in a YAML and wanted to use it at instance setup time, it wouldn't work today because the init commands just don't use config manager. So we've been working on that for like over a year. It's just really delicate code with a lot of conditionals, so we've had to do extensive testing, and right now it's passing the majority of our tests, but we still have a keyring failure. So you can look forward to this soon. It's just we got to finish our testing, and then setup will be faster and more valid. It's going to have more validation.
Cool. So, uh, as the config manager schema validation stuff has evolved, we have evolved into error messages that were mixed ASCII and EBCDIC and just plain crashing and stuff. And we evolved out of that, thank you, into error messages which give this like, you had a failure in X, and then there's this cascading thing, but it's hard to read for users. I've learned how to read
Yeah.
those, and I wonder if there's going to be any improvement to the way that the your YAML made this mistake is presented.
Um, yeah, I don't think that's a finished topic. I think that can always get better. It might be that in order to get better, we have to restructure it a bit because in schema, you can say one of, only of, if, else. There's like so many ways in schema to say the same thing, but they might display error messages in more or less readable
Right. Oh,
ways.
I'd forgotten
So,
that. That's right. There's one that's got a one of, and it gives you an error message about the one that I didn't use.
right, exactly. So we might be able to rephrase the schema without actually changing the behavior of it, rather just the reporting of it. So I wouldn't say we're done on that yet, but I also don't know if it will ever be truly elegant because schemas are just somewhat not really plain English, you know?
Right, right. Anyway, I'm just hoping for a little bit of improvement in that, so that perhaps customers could see this message and figure out what to do instead of opening a case saying, "Please read this error message
Yeah.
for me."
And if you have specific failures that you're like, wow, this looks ugly, let us know, or even let Jordan know because he's done a lot of the enhancements. But yeah, there's sometimes it looks good and sometimes it looks not so good. And I don't think we're done yet. Um, so I know we're over time, but I did want to show a few more things, just things to get people excited. Um, essentially, one of my missions for a long time has been trying to get the install and config easier and trying to get optional features easier. So I feel like there's still many different angles to perfect, but one of the things that is upcoming is that today, if you wanted to do network configuration of Zowe, if you wanted servers to use a particular level of TLS or bind to a certain IP, keep in mind that Zowe version 2 doesn't have perfect IPv6 support, but Zowe must have IPv6 support soon. So in order to sort of solve these problems and solve them in a pleasant way, we are going to be enhancing the schema of the Zowe YAML, and there's just going to be a new section called Zowe Network. Actually, it's an existing section, but we're expanding it. So Zowe.network is going to have a section called server and another section called client. And within both server and client, you have TLS as a subsection. TLS is going to have things like which ciphers do you want to use? What is your max and min TLS as enums for which TLS could be used? And then for the server, there's also going to be listen address. And so what I'm really saying here is I want extenders to be on the lookout for this new property of the Zowe YAML, because the standardization only works if, well, all of the servers read it. So here's a diff, for example, in ZSS, in which I'm making ZSS read it. And you can see here that ZSS used to not have a max and min TLS property, but I added them, and I do this thing where I say, if my component has a subsection called Zowe.network, I'm going to read that and use that value. Else, if outside of my component, if just the plain old Zowe scope has a network area, I'm going to read that. Otherwise, I will truly default. And so this sort of logic is what I'm hoping that all extenders will be able to move towards in the next year. It's not ready yet, but it will be. So if we can all get our servers to respect these values when they're present, then it will be much easier for users to have their server networking the way that they want it.
Is
Not
your stuff with TLS gonna have some ability to magically turn into, Java options to
Yes,
specify any of these things?
sort of. So let me show you what I was doing on the mediation layer. I haven't submitted a pull request there yet, but let me find my branch. Here it is. I have made, let's see if I can find my diff here.
In your 1900 commits.
Yeah, here we go. So you can see in the mediation layer, this is one of the reasons why we're not quite IPv6 ready yet, is you can see here that the mediation layer currently wants to go to address 0000. But what we really need is to allow the user to set that. So you can see here that all that I did is I already had a -d parameter, but I've set it to an environment variable, and this comes from the Zowe YAML. And you can see here I'm doing the if-then stuff of shell here. So I think that's your answer for Java.
Okay.
But yeah, so I wanted to let people know that that's coming, and it would be great if everyone standardizes on it. I'm sure that we'll do like a webinar or something when it actually comes out. I also want to do the same for ATTLS, because ATTLS currently has very different instructions for every server, and it would be much better if the servers could just switch themselves into the right mode upon seeing certain variables like this. So I'll probably work on that after doing the basic networking stuff. And here's the last thing that I wanted to show is people probably know that when Zowe starts up, it is hard to tell when it's really ready, and there's a lot of warnings that happen because there's no notion of which server should start in which order currently. And so what happens is a lot of servers have to poll waiting for other servers to be ready, and that shows up as silly log messages. So we've been thinking about this for a while. You can see this is like over a year old, but the idea here is in your extensions manifest.yaml, we would like to add a section called dependencies, which talks about whatever dependencies you possibly have. If you need Java, we want to know that. If you need Java at a certain version, like version 17, we'd want to know that because we can do validation, prevent users from making mistakes. But But really, the most interesting one here is probably the component section. That if your component depends on the gateway, for example, your manifest should say that. And then what we could do is we could delay startup of your server until we see a message from the gateway that indicates that it's ready. So this is probably far away from release, but I can imagine it would be out sometime during the V3 timeframe. So yeah, just keep your eye on this one, because this may be a solution to order of events in Zowe startup to prevent excessive warnings and maybe even make it faster. But that's all I have. Just wish list features, things that I'd like to do someday.
So, Sean, for that last one,
there's no clapping hand here. Oh, there is a clapping hand. Okay, good.
We don't push a clapping hand. So, Sean, were you thinking of starting the Discovery server first then, and holding back all the rest?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that seems to make sense.
So I did an experiment of that myself, absolutely kludge experiment with just a bunch of delays in the shell. And I just counted for like 15 seconds or something. And the log, the amount of noise in the log just went down. Yeah. So yeah, and obviously a more scientific solution would be better. Oh, and I just want to say, hey, Madeline's on the call as well. Madeline from Sagas. Awesome. So that's great. Yeah, because cool. Madeline, you're very quiet. I haven't seen you come off mute yet. Have you? This is all exactly. This must be great. I was at iDug recently, and Roy Boxwell was there, and I got a lot of great customer feedback from the Sagas extensions that you guys have been building.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for staying on the line. So we are several moments over. Appreciate everybody staying on. As we mentioned at the beginning, the recording will be available at zowe.org/vnext. And all of the various speaker contact information will be available in the slides that will also post there. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us should you have any questions, concerns, comments on what Sean had proposed for up and coming. And yeah, we'll start our consumer office hours in January. Look forward to having you join us then as well. Until then, be well and enjoy Zowe. Thanks.
Thank you.